Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the main event, the history of the Champions League. I'm Martin Ramsey, your host. As ever, we have reached 2010-11 and possibly, arguably, one of, if not the greatest club side of all time. To debate that in time, over the course of the next 4 episodes, I'm joined by David Edgar. How are we, David?
I'm good, thank you, mate. A wee bit surprised and if I'm honest, disappointed we're still doing this when the Champions League peaked in the previous year with the definitive winner and the definitive way to win it, which was explained over the course of 4 episodes. But here we are with one of Adam's teams. It's a nice jump. He got through last week and he's rewarded with one of these teams that disappointingly contain 11 footballers as opposed to 10 bastards and Wesley Schneider, which was more my thing last time out. But no, looking forward to it as always. Oh, there is some Jesper Gronka. I love Jesper Gronka.
Yes, it was good to see him in the notes in advance. How are we, Adam?
Good, thank you. Yeah, I think got through last week is the last 4 episodes is probably the right word. I think I might have threw a tantrum near the end. I can't remember.
A little bit, yeah. There was a little bit of a tantrum.
Fed up with the bullshit, but yes, we have sheer art for the next 3 or 4 hours, which is what we're after. So yeah, all good.
What are your feelings on Jesper Gronka? Because I need to know this before we go any further.
Yeah, and industrious, shall we say? I really like. I thought he was
pro.
There's so many of them, like Dennis Romdahl and guys like that. Yeah,
there's just something about a Dane who goes to Ajax. I think there's just something about that, and our listeners will know exactly what I mean. You can't quantify why it's cool. It's like a Balkan striker playing for Milan. There's just something about it.
This edition of the Champions League had something for the first time that is no longer part of football. Can anyone remember, or indeed tell me through knowledge, it's not luck, what that was?
Silver goal?
No. Think
Bursaspor?
No, we have a few debutants.
No, fourth official?
No, it's the little officials behind the goal.
Oh, those lads with the wee flags.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise known as assistant referees, but just put behind or to the side of the goal or whatever, just on the touchline, effectively. I can't remember offhand how long they lasted, possibly until VAR, to be honest, and they became utterly redundant. Yet more jobs lost through AI. Those lads.
I always wondered
an innovation that wasn't warmly received as they very really are.
I always wondered, Martin, if there's like a referee's pecking order, and it's sort of like if those lads were there and the original 4, the fourth official and the 2 assistant refs and the ref were sort of looking at them derogatory. And, the guys were saying, "Oh, so lads, what's the tactic for the night?" And they're looking at them going, "You might call yourself assistant linesman, but you're not really. You don't run the line. You just walk slowly."
He's brought his own flags. I was like the fourth official, more of an experienced dad that just gets brought in to oversee. He's had his time. He's been there and done that. Too much, if anything, and just wants to just oversee and just be there, keep managers in check, just keep everything as it should be and allow the game to flow. But yeah, they made their debut in the Champions League. I think it wasn't a long time living. I think it had been tried out in the Europa League maybe the year before, but there we are. We start the group stages as always with this week and next, because we always say, do we really have a show? 2 shows for group stage football? And then I look at the clock and it's at 42 minutes and we're just out of Group B. But let's start with Group A. the holders, David, Internazionale of Milan, no longer with Jose Mourinho, who has now gone to Madrid, more of which next week. His good, close friend, Rafa Benitez, had taken over, the two of them thick as thieves, of course. A lot of comings and goings, would not really much in the way of eye-catching ones. I mean, Balotelli went to Man City that summer, but I'd say the bulk of that team is still kicking about, but very much in some kind of hangover, I think it's fair to say.
There was a hangover, and there was still the shadow the cast by Jose, because as he left, he let it be known that he wasn't particularly impressed with Inter's choice. And of course, to a support for whom he walked on water at this time, then they took that with them. There was very much a stepdad vibe going on here, Martin. And the Inter support were very much, you're not my real dad. And their real dad was telling them that their stepdad was someone to be ignored. So no, it never really worked out. Interesting. He would do it again, of course, at Chelsea, wouldn't he? Following into a club that, so I mean, he wasn't afraid to go in, but it didn't last long. It didn't work. We talk about this all the time. It's very difficult, I think, for a support. I think it's difficult for a manager to go into a club where he's not particularly wanted anyway, unless he starts quickly. We've discussed this, before. I think you have to get off to a great start to bring them on board. Otherwise, there's nothing for a support to hold on to. I think it's almost impossible when they don't want you, because say that he had, delivered Serie A and the Cup that year, you're only maintaining. You're not going to match what Inter did before. He wasn't going to win the Champions League again. So at best, you match it, and they're like, well, big deal, that you're doing it with Jose's team, etc. Of course, as soon as it starts to go wrong, you don't get Jose gets the credit for it being his team the previous year, but you get the blame when it goes wrong. He also, I think, stylistically, it didn't fit. Adam, you're more knowledgeable about this than me, but although both of them, I think, have a reputation as defensive managers, to put it very simplistically, Adam, I'll put it
control.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. They love control, but the way they went about it, Benitez was a micromanager, whereas Mourinho was more about a repetition of things. Benitez was more about moving your fullbacks
and yeah.
Yeah, and the Inter players didn't take to it. Again, a bit like that Chelsea side we discussed a few campaigns ago on this show, that the players were in love with the previous manager, and they knew that the previous manager didn't write the new one. It was an ill-fated marriage from the start, and it did not last long.
And I'm joining Inter in that group, because Inter do go through. But they go through in second place, and topping the table, a Champions League debut for Tottenham Hotspur. From memory, I am going to memory here rather than notes. I'm sure they nicked that Champions League spot, or confirmed that Champions League spot at the Etihad very late on in the previous season. As them or Man City. And Harry Redknapp's there. I think they got Rafa van der Vaart this summer from Real Madrid. And I suppose the early part of those games, those encounters, was at the San Siro, and to race into this 4-0 lead. Absolutely bliss Spurs out the way. I mean, 30-odd minutes? They were 4 up. And then a myth, a legend, certainly a Champions League legend is born when Gareth Bale decides to put on a bit of a one-man show. I mean, he pulls one back, and his blistering pace is outstanding. I think that we gave Maicon all these flowers last week, but from memory, he had a bit of a torrid time here. A little overrated, the hat trick, because the second goal comes in the 90th minute, and the other comes in injury time, in a game that's effectively obviously 4-1 at that point. But Bale had something about him, and a story was built around that, which of course he would go on to absolutely write chapter after chapter at Real Madrid. But Spurs eventually did the biz.
They did. I still obviously it's such a huge rise, I think, for Bale, because like what, 4 or 5 months ago he was a joke at Spurs. That start where they hadn't won a game.
Yeah, it was the jinx, right? It was the Jonah.
Yeah, they hadn't won a game in his first 25 games, I think it was. Doesn't seem that bad if we're thinking about Spurs right now, to be honest. But at the time, I remember that as horrendous luck, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I remember actually being in the pub watching this game, and although he had been doing very well, it was a very low bar, if that makes sense, in terms of how poor he'd been before that, and he was doing well. I did not see this coming at all. You think up against Maicon, in my head, yes, same as what you've said there, the last year or two before that, one of the best fullbacks, and if not the best fullback in Europe at the time. And you're thinking, okay, that's obviously going to be difficult. Yes, it's Benitez. Yes, he was not doing very well at all. We can come on to discuss the differences between the two, absolutely, and the surprise when Leonardo replaces him, and I think he sets a record, 11 or 12 games was the best record in Serie A, the amount of points that he got when he came in, but we can chat about all that later. But yeah, I think the Spurs thing, huge surprise. The 3 goals were really similar, all 3 of them coming onto the ball on the edge of the box and putting them in the opposite corner.
Spurs were down at 10, remember, as well. That was they lost to Aurelio Gomes early on for the penalty that Eto'o scores, which is in like the first 10 minutes, and 2-0, 10 men. He wouldn't be sent off for it now, as we know, but back then that was a rule.
I think
a positive change. And do you know what's weird watching this, Adam? Do you know what I found really weird about this? Gareth Bale left back.
I know,
because of course he goes to Real Madrid, and we now know Gareth Bale is this wide forward, really. But yeah he was what kids once upon a time. He was a rampaging. But you're right, the 3 goals are almost identical.
You kind of forget about it though, don't you? Because it's not really one of those ones that people speak about. Remember when he turned into? It's more remember when he got good. There isn't really a positional chat with him, but you're right. It seems strange that he was that. And I guess when you think about it now, I'm trying to think, if I was thinking about a player like that now, you would probably think in your head he potentially needs to be playing at fullback, because he can then rampage forward and step onto the ball in those areas, like those goals, as we mentioned, certainly the first one. But it's that transformation, similar to Ronaldo, I guess, in a way, but maybe more pronounced, because you're going from fullback to wide forwards, centre forward at times, whereas Ronaldo was obviously right winger to forward, or vice versa. So it's not really that much of a change. But yeah, fantastic. This game just completely stunned me. The Maicon thing, yes, it's easy to look back on. Everyone's the king until they get brought down a peg or two. He was just one of those players, I think, that forced himself on a game to such a certain extent that it masked his defensive deficiencies, shall we say, or just not really wanting to do that, coupled with the fact that Inter were absolutely outstanding defensively around about him the year before, which obviously helps. So yeah, this was really, really interesting. The thing that strikes me most about this group, and it's maybe signified in this game, was just the amount of goals. Absolutely insane amounts of goals. All 4 teams concede more than 10 goals. I don't know how often that happens, and it was a really interesting group.
Yeah, the interesting thing for me is Werder Bremen and Twente are the other 2 sides in it. Now, looking at that beforehand, I think we would all suggest who would go through in that, but Twente come through for the 3rd place, and it's Werder at the bottom, which kind of signals their descent, really, doesn't it, from being a side who we've discussed a lot on this show. Spoiler alert, we're not going to discuss them much more. They've been a regular part of Champions League football. 2025, they are very much not. as we sit today. But this was an interesting period in Dutch football as well. You know, the Van Gaal a couple of years earlier, even a couple of years earlier with Alkmaar. You had Twente, Steve McLaren, etc. over there doing. So it was an interesting period where there were good sides, which isn't always the case for that bunch under the top three in the Netherlands. But yeah, I must admit, I was really, really impressed by the way that the teams approached this. Maybe because in Werder's case, they weren't very good. In Twente's case, they were a Dutch side who played in the classic. They scored a shitload of goals domestically as well, but that left them open. And Tottenham are Tottenham, and it's a very, it's Harry Redknapp, Tottenham era, Peter Crouch, etc. They were very much a side who could score a lot of goals. They had plenty of attacking talent, but you could get at them. So maybe that made for it in this group. But it's such an interesting state of flux because you've got Werder, who we've discussed a lot on this show, Tottenham, who we haven't discussed once, and now that's going to completely change. And I'm always intrigued when you get these clubs and they'll sort of intersect. They intersect for a moment on their way up and way down, and I think we've very much got that in this group.
We'll maybe pick the Bale thing up again. Well, in fact, we will pick the Bale thing up again when he is at Madrid. We won't. We're going to stop this history just for recency bias sakes, I suppose. When Real finally achieved the decima in 2014, of which he was a part, but he would go on to do obviously a hell of a lot more in the Champions League in some spectacular fashion, and I'm not sure he gets the plaudits he maybe deserves for that kind of record, that kind of impact, because he's a kind of weird fish, isn't he, really? He seems to show an absolute disdain for the sport at times, kind of would rather be playing golf, but yet does incredible things in big moments. But we will pick that up again. Group B then, and the best team in Europe to just say their name, Schalke 04, who top Group B. Adam and Raúl is there, and he's kind of he's swansong. He's finally prized away from Madrid. Who should have been the chosen one? Klaas-Jan Huntelaar is there. He looked like he was going to dominate Europe, and then went to two European heavyweights and didn't do it. He did in Holland, weirdly. He's 45 games for Real Madrid and Milan combined, scored about 15 goals. It's not dreadful, but it's maybe not what we expected. However, is filling his boots at Schalke, and a young Manuel Neuer at the other end, pretty much keeping everything out. Nice wee combination they've got going.
Yeah, it is, and this is why I think we're correct to stop in 2014, because some of these names in my head, I'm thinking, watched them last week in the previous group case.
There's Joe Matip in here, and there's Ivan Rakitic. Joe Matip seems very, doesn't he?
It's really difficult, I think, to discuss the early years of someone's career when you know the story. When the later years are so there. For example, in that last group, Luc de Jong scores for 20, and I'm like, come on, that is literally last week. What is going on? He's very, very young, of course, as we know. But yeah, so that's why I think it's a good point. Some of these names as well, it feels like we've only really had Raúl. Doesn't feel like we've mentioned him enough. I think we had a bit of a discussion, didn't we, about how potentially underrated. I know that's a really lazy word for it, but 16 years at Real Madrid.
It was a strange move, though, wasn't it? Even at the time, because look, Schalke are a massive football club, and they're one of the clubs who may be out with their own country. Maybe that is due to underachievement in Europe, but Schalke get the stadium, I think, holds 90,000, and they fill it. They're an enormous football club, but they've hit really torrid times the last few seasons, badly mismanaged financially. But when he went there, it was sort of like, okay, yeah, I mean, big club, Champions League football, Bundesliga, but it players didn't do that, did they? They didn't go to not players of his stature. They didn't really go there. And it's an interesting sign of a time when players who did want to try something different, they meant within another big league in Europe. They didn't mean by that, I want to go and earn, untold millions in basically a retirement league. So this squad, though, it's such an interesting mix. People forget this about Manuel Neuer. The Bayern Munich fans hated him because of his antics at Schalke. Do you remember this? That when he signed, you can go and look this up, folks. This is true. The Bayern Ultras issued a list of conditions for him to sign. One of which was he was allowed to come and play for them, but he was not allowed to celebrate on the pitch any Bayern win or any Bayern trophy win. I think they've changed their tune on him as we record in 2025. But they really hated him back then. And there's a couple other interesting names in here as well. Christoph Metzelder, the German World Cup winning midfielder, and a very young, but playing a lot, 30 appearances, Julian Draxler, who was a player I liked an awful lot. And rather interestingly, sliding doors, he was the player that Jurgen Klopp wished to sign in the summer of 2015. Instead, he was overruled, and they bought a certain Mohamed Salah.
It's funny again. Some of those names, I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, it does feel like just a few years ago. But the thing about Raúl, I wanted to finish on, I guess, or mention there is maybe this is when we're starting to see that modernity a little bit in terms of, I guess, the financial pool of Champions League clubs, as in Schalke, not historic big support, absolutely, but not historically a hotbed of the cream of the crop in Europe over the 15 years before this, since the Champions League inception. But Raúl openly said, basically, I went because they've got Champions League football, which in my head means they were the best club interested in me who had Champions League football. And it's one of those ones that you think the Bosman ruling has been there now for 10, 15 years. It's not a new thing that someone like Raúl would be on the market. But what I think is a new thing is clubs are starting to say, 33-year-old Raúl, can you run? Can you do what we need you to do? Not 100%. So that's a really interesting one. And it's one of those ones I think, wow, he's at Schalke. That's interesting. But I think the reasons for it are maybe more cynical, if you like.
I'd agree with that, because if he'd wanted to go to Germany and he was still, the player he had been, he's going to Bayern, isn't he? Let's be honest. Yeah. If he'd wanted to go to England to play, at this point in his career, he wasn't getting a team who were playing in the Champions League. He would get a move to England, obviously, but it wouldn't be to one of the top four. So, yeah, it's quite an interesting one to think of. I think he's a top scorer there that year, but the numbers are decent. I think he's like 1 every 2.5. It's not Van Nistelrooy style numbers. And he does fine, but yeah, I think when you're rolling out, because he was on a lot of money at Schalke.
I mean, they do well, spoiler alert, but they have a good old run. Adam, I think that's an interesting point. I do wonder if it's a sign of the times, because that seems quaint to me now, that a footballer at any point of their career would say, okay, where's the money? Right. But where's the prestige? Where I need to be playing at this level. We know where players are going now. Young players, never mind those at 33, young players with so much ahead of them going to Saudi, not giving a tinker's toss where what stage they're going to be part of.
To take it to the extreme, he's at Fulham or Everton now, probably.
Exactly. But is that 2010, or is that Raúl because of where he's come from? He's Real Madrid through and through. He has the Champions League running through his veins. He just needs to be playing. He's addicted to that particular competition, or is it a sign of the times? I mean, when did Oscar go to China? Still a wee bit.
Yeah, it was after the. I think though, I agree with you, but something else we've discussed on this show, I think there is in this case a bit of individualism in it because, as I say, it was an unusual club, and it was at the time it was well discussed. With people saying, "Wow, I can't believe he's going there." We're now though, Martin. 10 years later, there's more, 15 years later, but 15 years of a social media world. I think the individualization of football is far more pronounced now, and the brand of the individual footballer is far more pronounced now than it was then. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Ronaldo is still the most famous footballer in the world. He's been in Saudi for a couple of years, so it doesn't really damage your brand because you're very visible still through. I think he's got like several nations worth of people following him on Instagram. So you're still very much in the public consciousness there. Whereas I think Raúl, because even though this is 2010, when you think of Raúl, you think of a kind of, this is the end of this generation for him. I think to someone like him, well, of course I need to be in the Champions League because that's the be-all and end-all. That's the big competition. Whereas I think for a lot of, Benzema's another example of this. He could easily have gone to another club. One of the things he said is, well, I could play in the Champions League, but what's the point if I'm not playing for a club who can win it?
Yep.
So, Benzema could go easily, could have went to another Champions League club. And I mean a decent one. I'm not talking about, someone who's going to go in the group stage for money. I'm talking about, someone who could be a quarterfinals, whatever, but he didn't think he could play for a side who could go and actually win it. So his view was, well, yes, it's great to be in the top competition, but not if I can't excel in it.
Adam, Lyon are the other team to go through from that group. Where are they at this moment in time? A combination of experience and youth. Hugo Lloris is there. Pjanic, Lissandro, very young. Lacazette, I think this is his first season, and Dejan Lovren, I think, is there before he moved on. We speak about Lyon seemingly every season. Where are they in their large cycle?
Yeah, so they are still relying heavily, I think, on Lisandro Lopez. I think he's got another couple of years left here. Sort of his feels like his spells at Porto and Lyon kind of merged into one. They were very similar clubs at this time, I guess, in terms of what they were trying to do. The players were trying to attract levels there. Claude Puel is the manager now. I think he's potentially got another season left. They do okay. Lyon. They lost Sidney Govou, who was a player I really liked. He left them that summer. Obviously, he'd been there for the whole of the noughties. Played a big part in that, but was maybe getting on a little bit and did a little bit of a tour around other clubs in Europe. So yeah, they're, I guess, what's the way to describe it? They would hope probably in between two eras. I'm not quite sure that was ever really the case. As we said, there's going to be a bit of a swapping about now in terms of who wins Liga and who doesn't for quite a bit of time. This was the year that Leo and Eden Hazard won it, 2010, 2011, which was a fantastic team. You've got Montpellier as well, who come the year after and win it, and then we're into the whole PSG era, which we will thankfully only get a couple of seasons off at the end, because I'm sure it's relatively boring for French fans, but for us, yeah, maybe even more so. So yeah, they're okay. I think Benfica are maybe the one I'd like to call out and here that
disappointment.
Maybe haven't done too much on. Really disappointing. This is a decent team. They've got George Jesus as well, who has pretty much managed every Portuguese club in history. I think some of them
twice,
multiple times, yeah. But he's here for 6 years or so, and he sort of beds down a little bit. And this is certainly, again, probably this modernity thing that was spoken about before. Freedom of movement, starting to actually uncover players before everyone else does. Benfica, Porto, to an extent, Lyon, guys like that are way ahead of the curve. Benfica have Paraguayan striker that I was a big fan of at this time, Oscar Cardozo, who scored a bucket load of goals for them over this decade. He was fantastic. They've got Luizão in there as well. They're really starting to harvest South American talent at this point. A young David Luiz is there, another one that you wouldn't really think. But they're starting to then see this next generation of Portuguese players coming through as well, such as Fabio Contrao, Rubin Amorim, to bring it to the most modern you could probably bring it, is kicking about in here as well for them. But they do still have an interesting little mix of other players. Javier Saviola is there, Nuno Gomez still kicking about, and Pablo Aimar as well, as I live and breathe. So they're an interesting team at this point. They play a functional style of play. For my money, I'd have had them winning that group, to be honest, just in terms of how they've been together for a couple of years. Lyon maybe in that little bit of a lull that we've mentioned. So I'd have had them winning that group, to be honest. And it does come down to relatively small margins. He says it is 4 points, but I do think they'd be disappointed not to get through in that, because that's one of those groups. If you exclude Hapoel Tel Aviv from the start, you would think whipping boys, but they managed to get 5 points. But the other three are surely much of a muchness, with, to my money, Benfica being the best probably. So yeah, bit unfortunate for them.
Can't hear enough Nuno Gomes. And if anyone wants to do a minute by minute of Euro 2000, I am your man. I'm willing. I have the time and inclination. Okay, Group C is the Rangers group. They have a very typical Rangers start in the Champions League, really. Good point away from home, Old Trafford. Wow, okay, good.
Yeah.
Didn't beat the whipping boys at home, but we didn't hammer them, but we won, and okay, that's fine. Points on the board there, and then a draw with the other big team, which is Valencia at home. A Moedu double, one at either end. So 5 points, not bad, and then the big kind of collapse wobble in the middle and scurrying about to get that Europa League place in Turkey in the end. It's a very well-worn, well-trodden path.
Yes, it is. To be honest, this group, unlike several of the others, this transpires exactly as you would have read it beforehand. United 14, Valencia 11, Rangers 6, Bursaspor 1. That's this group in a nutshell. The third best team went into the Europa League. The second best team qualify, and the best team win by a mile. The Rangers the first one, the Manchester United Rangers game, for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's a cinematic masterpiece in the way that a movie that challenges you, as Rangers played a 6-3-1 that night, and the one was about 40 yards from the Rangers goal. No apologies for it whatsoever. And Rangers kept Manchester United at bay, and actually should have had a penalty. Kenny Miller, the one time we did go up the park, the VAR, I think, would have awarded it now. But, it was, I think, Sir Alex Ferguson, jokingly, because he loved the Rangers manager, Walter Smith, he said, he should be jailed for that. But it did get Rangers a point. This United side is full of functional players. In this group, there are goals for Gabriel Obertan and Bebe, which are names that I don't think are going to make any list of great United memories. But they won this, in a dawdle, 4 wins, 2 draws, and I think that they were pretty good. There was some good players at Valencia. I remember Roberto Soldado He's banging them in for this Valencia side. And Rangers-Valencia at Ibrox is a very good game. One each could have went either way. You're right, Moedu with an own goal to equalise after giving Rangers the lead. But in the away game, Rangers are absolutely outclassed by a Valencia side who were just better at football. Still in it till about 20 minutes to go, but then they sort of run away. Rangers had put a lot into keeping it to 1-0, to be honest, at that stage. Bursaspor are very, very poor in this group. Very poor. They don't get a point to the last night. They're out of it before the last night. And I think it is just that gap between the top teams that come out of Turkey. And every so often you'll get a Bursaspor or a Besiktas, but they don't really tend to. It's almost like getting that spot takes so much out of them. But they were a desperately poor side, swept away by pretty much everybody. United, where this is latter stage Ferguson, and obviously by this stage that we've gone through Champions League with them, United at the start, they were so much fun. You never knew what you were going to get. There were 3-3s and, silly defeat Gothenburg, for example, and mad results everywhere. This is not that. Look at the results. 0-0, admittedly playing, a 400-man defence. Then they go to Spain. They win 1-0, late goal. Then they win 1-0 at home to Bursaspor, early goal. Then they go and they win 3-0 in Bursaspor. Okay, 3-0, but Bursaspor are a terrible side. They beat Rangers 1-0. It's a late penalty. It was a penalty. It was a foul. Ryan Giggs that night played in centre midfield, and I remember he was absolutely superb. And you just thought, wow, what a footballer he is. Seeing him, close up as a Rangers supporter, even you could appreciate what he was doing in that midfield position. But United now they don't expend unnecessary energy in getting through group stages. It's a sign of their European maturity.
Yeah, that's the one thing I kind of took away from this. The Rooney penalty, 3 minutes to go? Very disappointing. And then the first night of the Ashes, I was all set to watch that, and that was a pretty disappointing night. That turned out a lot better, right enough. But United there, and I think we have spoken about this before, but a sign of a big club looking at the group and saying, right, we'll see you in March. We will just slip through the gears here and take it easy. And the Champions League group stages are maybe becoming a wee bit like that. So your thoughts on that? And also that Valencia side, Soldado, David mentioned this, almost like an English centre forward, really. And eventually, so he'd be quite good in the Premier League. Maybe he would have been if he hadn't gone to Spurs. Elvis, we sold Elvis, we bought the Beatles and all that. But you've got Mata and Joaquín, and there's lots going on at Valencia there.
There is. So yeah, I think your first point is spot on. There were clubs now who were guaranteed the group stage, I guess, and could almost use it as not quite. Doesn't really happen anymore. But remember there was a lot of clubs who would use the Europa League as a bit of a training ground, if you like. That seems to have gone. I don't. In present times, I'm not sure when that went, but I remember Spurs, for example, or even Everton going into the Europa League at times and pretty much playing the kids, certainly for the group stages. But in modern times, that seems to have gone. There was never it was never as far as that in the Champions League. But I think you're spot on. There were points where, particularly in those early stages of the season, where the league was undoubtedly the priority, because you'd think for clubs like Manchester United, it's going to be quite impossible to not get through a group stage, or it's certainly for where they were at that. Should be quite impossible to not get through a group stage. It only has to happen once before they get completely burned. But I think absolutely there's times like that where maybe not every single game, but they'll certainly take some game weeks easier than others, and it can only come back and bite you. Coming to this Valencia team, this was good. You are starting to see some of those guys coming through. You've got Joaquín there, who only just retired last year, I think it was, maybe the year before. So again, one of those players, but you've got a really tidy little bunch coming through. Vicente was someone that I liked. Pablo Hernández, who was it Leeds or Swansea he was at? I can't remember. Maybe potentially both. He was decent at this point. They've got a nice little sprinkling of Argentinians as well. But we are starting to see, I guess, this Spanish wave of players now that, in my mind,
because they just won the World Cup, so
yeah,
and that's the second tournament in a row.
Yeah, so you're starting to see that sort of the sort of next generation of that, I guess. You remember when it was all Spain don't really have a centre forward, and then a few popped up, and it's kind of like Spain don't really have wingers, but we're now starting to see this big switch, if it is really a big switch, and I've got my doubts about that. Maybe we could do this something on this a bit more detail in a future show. But the 4-2-3-1 becoming properly in vogue, and this was the first summer, I guess. This 2010 summer was where I first started to sort of be aware of it. Can't be far off. If it's not already happened, it'll be happening soon. Michael Cox coining the inverted wingers phrase, which is...
And when did the pyramid come out, Adam? I'm sure that was around 2010. Might have been a wee bit earlier than that, right enough. But
yeah, I think you might be right. I want to say 2011 potentially, and maybe a little bit earlier actually. Maybe a little bit earlier.
But I know what you mean, though. I mean, my memory certainly is that this is a breakthrough from the margins into the mainstream. Podcasts up the Guardian weekly, and Jonathan Wilson being on that, and Michael Cox, I think, being on that fairly regularly. But you do seem to have this tactical orthodoxy now.
Yeah, it was.
It's rubber stamped. It's in concrete. It's set in stone. This is how you have to play.
Yeah, and the whole inverted wingers piece, I think it's rare now to have a... What's the opposite of inverted? I don't know. A right winger on the right side, left on the left side. It's really rare to have that. But at the time, it was like, oh, so you don't want to go down. You don't want to go down the wing and cross the ball, and you want to cut inside into a really great position that nobody really seems to have done anything with for 40 years. And we'll obviously invent a wanky name for it called the half space. But you're starting to see a lot of this now, and it feels like, to me, those guys that we're going to be talking about that are coming through, your David Silvers, your Juan Matas, your Santi Cazorlas, are these type of guys who were wingers coming through because that was what we knew them to be. But very, very quickly, if it's not happening already, they're the sort of vanguard, if you like, of this new breed of inside-out wingers, inverted wingers, opposite-sided wingers, whatever you want to call it, that would then obviously go and evolve and become... well, in the extreme cases, David Silva becomes a central midfielder a few years later when Guardiola gets his hands on him at Man City, and a very good one at that. So yeah, I think you're right. This is where the boundaries are starting to get broken a little bit. As enjoyable as the 2000s have been, it was still very much, you play here, we've got a 3-man midfield, you play here, we've got a bit of a target man, we might think about having someone who can drop a little deeper and someone who can go in beyond at times, but it was still very much a 3-man attack with 2 wider players and 1 up top. You're now starting to see these norms and barriers getting broken and fluidity coming, and people are trying to find marginal gains everywhere on the literal pitch as well as off it. So I think in my head, I think Valencia and those sort of 3 Spaniards that I mentioned are that sort of next wave of Spanish players coming through, following that success you mentioned, yeah.
Okay. The final group tonight then is obviously Group D. And Adam, we just talked about Valencia there and their strikers and their best striker of the season before, and a very impressive World Cup with Spain as well. David Villa moves to Barcelona. Zlatan out. He goes to Milan. David Villa in. So you've got Messi, Villa, and Pedro. You've got maybe as important Javi Mascherano coming from Liverpool. And dare I say, this looks a hell of a lot better than what we saw last year.
Yes, it does. And this again, like we said, these norms getting broken. I remember the absolute shock when Mascherano went to Barcelona and was getting played as a centre half. People were like, "What is going on here?" This guy is 5'9" and he's playing at centre half and doing a very, very good job of it. So yeah, these things that we will talk about in terms of Guardiola. Not only he goes too far, like we've said, during probably every but one season at Man City in the Champions League, he goes too far and tries to do something to outfox people that's just too far. But at this point, the sort of simple changes that he's making, I think, have a huge effect. And yes, this three are really balanced now. We're sort of starting to see Messi's kind of moved away from that sort of surprise aspect of he's very much moved away from the surprise aspect anyway, but that sort of inversion that we spoke about there, I'm playing on the right hand side, but I'm left footed and I'm going to cut in and dribble. He's now firmly in that sort of false nine role at the most of the times and just gets that devastating quartet. I won't go into it in too much detail because we've got it coming for the final. But Busquets, Iniesta, Xavi, Messi, that box, square, whatever you want to call it, was way ahead of its time. So yeah, it's an interesting time here. He's really starting to, I guess, double down, isn't he, in terms of as you would when you're 3 seasons in and you've won almost everything that you could win. It was five out the first 6, wasn't it, in terms of his big trophies? I'm sure. So you would, but you're starting to see him potentially getting a bit of time and space to tinker in a way that he will obviously go in and do a bit more, but he maybe couldn't really do huge amounts of it. Other than that, in terms of their changes, Ibrahimovic going out. You could argue he's getting rid of some difficult characters, such as I think does Rafael Marquez go that summer? Potentially, I think he goes. Henry, who wasn't a difficult character, Henry absolutely loved it there. Yaya Toure, Ibrahimovic, difficult characters or people that are getting close to the age that maybe they can't be relied upon. Chigrinsky, who they signed, and one of those ones that you think that might be a great signing, that might make sense. They've pulled someone out of a team who's quite dominant. They need a defender like that. They spent a lot of money on him. It just never worked out at all. And the fact that he got replaced by Mascherano and they went on to become a better team is one of the most Pep Guardiola things I think you'll ever hear. So yeah, definitely doubling or trebling down at this stage on the philosophy and bringing in more and more ball players. It goes too far for my money. I think I've said that before, but not at this stage.
David, as good as Barcelona were in the way they cruised through the group, possibly the worst group I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's
in
weak.
terms of outside the top lads. Panathinaikos are friends. Rock bottom, Rubin Kazan go to the Europa League, and FC Copenhagen go through to the knockout rounds. And Jesper Gronke are still.
I prefer the term Gronke led FC.
Yes, sure.
If that's okay, just look, they were. Shall we see? Do you know who's also in their side, Martin? Diro Jibril Cisse.
No, he's not. He plays for Panathinaikos.
Sorry, in this group. I apologise.
Yes.
That there's some great names popping up here. Jesper Gronke, Jibril Cisse. There's some proper. I hate the term Barclays man. I prefer the term EPL stalwart because I grew up in an era of Topical Times football books and Roy the Rovers annuals. But yeah, there's some great names in this. The Copenhagen team were very much a throwback side. They were very hardworking. They had a couple of South Americans and a couple of African players who they added a bit of composure and a bit of touch, but they were not afraid at getting the ball very quickly from the centre back to the strikers, and that I think in this group playing that sort of pomo, it worked for them, but you're right, it's a very weak group. Rubin Kazan are not much to write home about, and this is one of the worst versions of Panathinaikos we've seen. Usually, even the years that they don't make us go on this show, as they have done a lot. Oh, wow, Panathinaikos did well again. That this is a poor version of it. Greece went through that stage of we'll bring in a lot of big name players. Turkey did it as well. We'll bring in a lot of big name players. We'll pay them a lot of money, and everything will get better. And of course, it doesn't. It becomes a bit of a retirement. It's a lovely place to go and live if someone's willing to pay you the money you were on at Liverpool or at Manchester City or at Atletico Madrid or whatever. But when you get into this competition, you look old. And the fact that as limited a side as this Copenhagen side, and it is a limited side, managed to get through in a basic way by, as I say, getting it up quickly, hard working, hard running. That I think kind of tells you that approach. I jokingly call it the Everton approach, where, well, he played for them and they were good, so we'll sign him. And if we get 6 players like that, it must work. That was Greek football was in that mode at the moment, and their teams looked old. And as I say, for any of the 3 sides in this who'd come through, they were cannon fodder on the next round. That's not Barcelona's fault, by the way. They cruised as they should have done. But you're absolutely right. There was no way. It was a toss-a-coin job with the other 3 poor sides.
That will do it, gentlemen. Thank you, David.
Pleasure as always, guys. Thank you.
Cheers, Adam.
Thank you.
Next week, some old friends, some new ones, and Mourinho in Madrid. Until then, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts, and breakdowns dropping every other day.